Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a great day. You're listening to or watching Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Church Blissett, and today's guest is Ryan Godfrey. Godfredson. I want to say Godfrey. I have a friend of mine whose last name is Godfrey. It's a Godfredson. Sorry. And I practiced that like 4 times in my head before we started. So,
well, I don't think I pronounce my name right half the time, so no big deal.
So today we're going to talk about our mindset and kind of getting the day started the right way and making sure that you start off on the right foot, I guess is kind of the best way to say it, because so often I know that I'm guilty. If I wake up in a bad mood, or like that first 5 or 10 minutes of the day, if it starts off really crappy, then the rest of my day, at least the next couple of hours, they're pretty trashed. And I think that one of the things, and we haven't talked about this offline or anything like this, but I think that one of the things that really can make or break my day is if I check my emails right whenever I like roll off on the side of the bed and I pick up my phone and it's like the first 5 emails I check, I'm like, bad news, or something like that, or check the news in general. But anyways, welcome to the show, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to connecting.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about you, about your what you have going on and how you got into what you're doing right now.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'm a leadership professor at Cal State Fullerton. And so I teach and I do research on leadership, and that's part of my academic job. But then I also do a lot of consulting where I work with businesses to develop their leaders and to develop their cultures. And the way that I do that is through a focus on mindsets. So what I've learned in my research is that our mindsets are our mental lenses that shape how we view the world. And we can have, for example, 2 different business leaders that both encounter the same situation, but if they look at it through different lenses, then they're going to interpret that situation differently, they're going to process that situation differently, and they're going to behave differently. And so I feel like one of my purposes is to help leaders and people awaken to their mindsets, because I think most people think that the current mindsets that they have is the best mindsets that they can have.
Oh, yeah.
But the reality is that most of us can probably have better mindsets. And I've got a significant amount of data to suggest that. In fact, I've got a personal mindset assessment. And what I find is that only 5% of respondents are in the top quartile for 4 different sets of mindsets that I focus on. So most of us have got some mindset work to do, myself included. And so I'm happy to, or I'm excited to jump in with you and kind of help your audience awaken to their mindsets.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Could you go through those 4? And for anybody that's watching this live, I've pinned the link to that mindset assessment also in the chat there. And for anybody that's listening to this, I'll put it in the show notes. But can you kind of go through that a little bit? And I'm super excited to know. I mean, I kind of knew that you obviously you can decide which path you're going to take. You don't have to be stuck in yesterday's rut. But sometimes it's really easy to see like a feel good motivational meme on Instagram or something like that, but then to actually put it into practice, that's sometimes people are like, oh yeah, it's easier said than done. Could you kind of go through that with us a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you bring up this idea of a meme, because I think in many ways that's kind of when most people talk about mindsets, it's like this fluffy concept.
Exactly.
But the reality is that mindsets are foundational to everything that we do. And so I try to approach the topic of mindsets by making it as tangible as possible. And one of the ways in which we do that is, one, we got to tap into research. What research has been done on mindsets? And that's where I've come up with 4 different sets of mindsets that have been studied for 30 plus years. And then we need to put labels on these mindsets, because if we don't have labels, then we have nothing to introspect about when it comes to our mindset. So when I talk to groups and I'll ask them, what mindsets do you need to have to be successful? I get one of 2 answers. I either get crickets, nobody says anything, or else they'll say positive mind, which I think is great, but what does that mean exactly?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so that's when we get into these different sets of mindsets. So just to kind of quickly go over some of these, the first set, and all of these range on a continuum from negative to positive. And so our mindsets are going to fall somewhere along the continuum. Usually we're not on the extreme negative side, and usually we're not on the extreme positive side. So the first set is the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset. So somebody who has a fixed mindset is they don't believe that they can change their talents, abilities, and intelligence.
Mm.
So another way of saying this is they have a tendency to see the world in terms of haves and have-nots.
Oh, yes.
So you either have the ability to do it or you do not have the ability to do it. And if you fail at something, what this sends us an indicator, or at least somebody with a fixed mindset sends them an indicator that I am a have-not. And if I'm a have-not, if this is something that doesn't come naturally to me, then I need to give up.
Do people, okay, so you're the expert here, so I'm going to ask you, is that a cop-out for some people? Because I so feel like they're like, oh, well, that's a natural talent for you. You're going to do that. I'm going to sit over here and sit in the corner and just watch you do your thing because you know how to do it.
In a way, at a surface level, it looks like a cop-out.
Okay.
What's going on under that is some fears and insecurities.
Okay.
And so for them, it's not like I'm copping out. It's I'm really scared, and they maybe don't recognize that. That's the thing about mindsets is for most of us, our mindsets exist at a non-conscious level, but they're dictating really how we think, how we learn, and how we behave. And
So
we're really not conscious of that.
Pretty much I'm just a jerk because I'm like, you're just copping out. You get over here and you figure this out too.
Well, no, but you bring up such a great point, because when we understand these concepts, it helps us to better understand others and where they're coming from themselves, right? Because and I'm there with you. Like it's I mean, let me give you an example of this. So just prior to sharing this example, there's the other side of the continuum. So that's fixed. The other side is a growth mindset. So this is when we do believe that we can change our talents, abilities, and intelligence. And so this means that if we were to fail at something, we don't necessarily, to us, this doesn't mean that we're a failure or that we're a have-not. I mean, we may even recognize that this means that I'm a have-not right now, but that doesn't preclude me from being a have in the future. So those with the growth mindset are much more likely to put forth effort and persevere in the face of challenges. And so the example that I want to share with you is this research study that is, in my mind, absolutely fascinating. And they took a group of people and gave them all a mindset assessment along this continuum of fixed to growth. And they were able to identify those that had more of a fixed mindset, those that had more of a growth mindset. And then they gave them all the same task, which was 8 easy questions and 4 difficult questions. Essentially, what they were doing is they were setting these participants up for failure, and they wanted to see if they would respond differently. So those that had more of the fixed mindset, as they're answering and getting the 8 easy questions right, they're getting really pleased with themselves. As soon as they hit those 4 difficult questions and start getting them wrong, they quickly become depressed. And they start beating themselves up, and they stop applying themselves. In fact, they just would start guessing at the answers. But those with the growth mind,
that was like my entire high school.
well, I think you're right, because I think in many ways our education system incentivizes a fixed mindset. Because what do we become focused on? Grades or learning, right? And so if we're so focused on grades and we get a bad grade, then we feel like this says something about us, right?
Us as a person.
Yeah. So those with in the study, those with the growth mindset, when they hit the 4 difficult questions, they didn't get depressed at all. In fact, they started to encourage themselves. Researchers said that they said things like, "Oh, I was hoping this would be a challenge." They continually applied themselves, and then even a couple of them got some of the answers right because they stuck with severe. And to me, this study is so fascinating because if we were to go back to all of these individuals and ask them, did you handle this situation in the best way possible? I think they all would have said yes. Like, how could I have handled it differently?
Hmm.
But when we take a kind of an observer perspective to this, we see that it's very clear that one group handled it much better than the other. And the reason why is in their mindset, something that they probably weren't even conscious of.
So does it count if you're being facetious? Because that's usually me. I'm like, oh, great. This is exactly what I was looking for. I want a challenge.
Well, I think it's one of the things about being facetious
Uh-huh.
is it can be a tool to give us some separation away from our lizard brain.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
right, our lizard brain is the one that instinctively reacts, and so when something, let's just say we fail or
Mhm.
we encounter a challenge, well, those are the fixed mindset are going to be inclined to avoid it, and that's going to be our natural reaction. But if we like step back for a moment and joke about it, what
Mhm.
we're doing is we're creating space for us to kind of switch gears and gear up for what is going to come in the
Well,
future.
good news
So
is I have lots of space. That's my go-to move.
I love it.
Cool. So how about the second one? Because that's, I mean, that we could talk. Heck, we could probably talk days on that alone. But
Yes, that's for sure. But yeah, so the second one is the difference between a closed mindset and an open mindset. So being closed is just what it sounds like. We're closed to the ideas and suggestions of others. When we have an open mindset, we're open to others' ideas and suggestions. And so I guess maybe let me ask you a quick question is
yeah,
what would lead somebody to be closed to the ideas and suggestions of others?
um, getting burnt probably by somebody in the past, or not having trust, and I'm sure there's other things too, but that's the two that kind of come top of mind.
Yeah. So part of it is when you're saying that we've been burned or we don't trust this person, is what we're really saying when we're not open to their ideas is I think I know what is best more than you do,
Yeah.
right? So when we think that what we know is best, then what happens is it causes us to mentally shut down, and we want to be seen as being right. We
Yeah.
want to have our ideas supported, and we want to be the one with all the answers. And so we
Guilty.
shut down the perspective of others.
Guilty. Totally.
Well, and this is the thing is I think, we've all been there. And for me, the reason why I focus on mindsets is because I need this work as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
And in many ways, having a closed mindset, we feel like it serves us because it creates greater certainty for us. Whereas when we have an open mindset, we're open to others' ideas and suggestions, then we're not focused on being right. We're focused on finding truth and thinking
Yeah.
optimally.
Yeah.
And so we're much more inclined to ask questions as opposed to provide answers. And we're much more open to the ideas and suggestions of
So
others.
how do you do that as you want to be a strong leader for your business, but at the same time, you don't want to have the closed mindset. So I recognized years ago that I had a very closed minded mindset, and I was working towards being more open minded, but also not sounding like I didn't have the confidence in running the business. So when people come to me, like, one of the ways that I've done that is, taking and when they come to me for advice or support, helping in any way, I request that they come with three solutions also, and so then we can back and forth against their solutions versus mine. Sometimes I'm like, no, your solutions are stupid and mine's the right way, but most of the times I try and incorporate what they have to say, and um, I think that that's kind of my transition. That's how I've worked towards that. And then I've even gotten some guys on my team who have succeeded past me in the technical knowledge because I'm like, hey, look, man, like this is your job. Like my job is to do office stuff, and I do this stuff over here. Whereas you're the expert in the field, and I want you to know more than me. I don't want to be tech support. I want you to be my tech support when I have a question. um, And so they've kind of taken that and they've ran with it. And so I don't know if I've done it the right way. I didn't get any like actual formal training on what you're talking about. So I don't know if I did it right or didn't do it right. I don't know, but that's kind of how I did it.
No, and I think you're very much headed in the right direction. So I think the key is we need to check our focus. Are we more concerned about being right, or are we more concerned about finding truth? And there's a lot of pressure if you're a leader to be right,
Exactly.
right? And this is when we feel that pressure, we're coming from a place of uncertainty ourselves, like, and maybe a little bit of insecurity. And so it's something that's really helpful for me is an analogy. And that is if we compare our mind to a bucket, when we have a closed mindset, our bucket is full. We feel like what we know is best, so our bucket is full. So what happens if we pour something into a full bucket?
Yeah, over
Well,
goes right over.
yeah, nothing gets absorbed. Everything goes off the side. And so what we need to do is mentally is we need to enhance the size of our bucket, right? So we can know a lot. Our bucket could be really full, but as long as we just leave a little bit of room for the idea that we can be wrong, then we develop the capacity to take in these new ideas and suggestions. And so that analogy is helpful. But then also you said you have people bring 3 solutions, right?
Mhm.
Well, and one of the things that you said is sometimes they're not the best solutions.
Yeah.
Well, rather than saying, hey, these aren't good solutions,
Yeah.
a better approach might be to say, what makes you think that these are good solutions, right? We're asking questions, and by asking questions, we could steer them in the right direction.
Mhm.
Or we could just say, those are dumb ideas.
Mhm.
Like, what's going to go better for that
The
individual?
problem is
Um,
my
and,
guys know how much of a smart aleck I am. So when I ask them, "So what makes you think this is gonna be a great idea?" And they're gonna be like, "Don't be a jerk, Tersh."
yeah.
No, we all joke around. So we really do enjoy each other's company. And that's one of the big culture things that we have to have going on with our company is we have to be able to joke with each other.
Hmm.
And we run that fine line too. If somebody's having a bad day, you got to check yourself and, but everybody's pretty thick skinned and we really do enjoy each other's company. So that's very helpful. But yeah, when I do say that's a pretty dumb idea, they assume I'm joking anyways. So they're like,
Yep.
"Well, what's your great idea there, Tersh?" But yeah, it, and that's the thing that kind of I've gone like over the years because I started doing that about 6 years ago is whenever I really started doing that because I heard it somewhere on some podcast. And because I was getting, no lie, I was getting 120 phone calls a day from service techs, just asking me, "How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do
Gee.
this?" And so I just said, I did a company wide meeting. I said, "You must provide me with 3 solutions every time you call and ask me a question,
Hmm.
and if you don't, I'm going to hang up on you." And like it took like a week of just hanging up on people. And then they call me back, "Hey, I think we lost connection." "No, I hung up on you. Call me back with 3 solutions." Click. And so then it kind of made them self-reliant at the same time, whereas I was no longer their crutch. So it was kind of like a win-win for all of us there.
No, that's great.
Yeah. Cool. So, how about number 3?
Yeah. So the third set, and this is one where we talked just briefly before we jumped on this, where one of the things that you feel like your audience may be experiencing is burnout,
Yes.
right? And I think that this set of mindsets may get it that the best. And so the difference is between a prevention mindset and a promotion mindset. So prevention's on the negative side, and when we have a prevention mindset, our primary focus is on not losing. When we have a promotion mindset, our focus is on winning and gains. And to make this come to life, I want us to imagine that we're a ship captain in the middle of the ocean. And if we have a prevention mindset, our number one focus is on not sinking.
Hmm.
We don't want any problems to occur. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to take any risks, right? And so we become very vigilant with this mindset. And what happens is that when a storm comes on the horizon, as it inevitably will,
Hmm.
then our inclination is to run from the storm as a way to stay safe. And so we'll go to a harbor or port, but we've got to ask ourselves, is that harbor the destination that we originally set out for?
Right. Exactly.
Probably not, right? So those with the promotion mindset, it's not that they're not concerned about sinking. Of course, they don't want to sink, but their number one focus is on a destination and making progress towards it. And so when that storm comes on the horizon, rather than run from it, they ask themselves, does that stand between me and where I want to go? And if the answer is yes, then they prepare to take on the storm, and then they develop the courage to brave the winds and
Mm.
the currents that are associated with that, because they know that that is the only way to get to their destination. And so I just imagine that if you're getting, if it's 108 degrees, 90% humidity, you're getting bombarded by all these jobs, is in some ways it gets to this point where it's like, I just want to avoid problems, as opposed to how do I get to my destination? How do I create solutions?
That's such a good point because there is, rather than being reactive or just being in that shell and saying like, all right, let's just put up our guard, our shield, and let's stay away from any kind of um like burnout, potential burnout. Like, let's just stop dealing with this, like just guard ourselves. Why not put in a policy or procedure in place or some sort of automation so that if it's the same thing that you're coming that's coming at you every single time, let's just prevent that from happening in the future. Like, I mean, granted, sometimes it's like hiring, and it's if you're an HVAC guy, and a lot of my friends and listeners are in the HVAC industry, so you get that there's not a lot of great techs this time of year looking for a job because the great ones already have jobs and they're very
Mhm.
happy in what they're doing most of the times. And so it's not as easy as saying, okay, just hire more people, because then you have to think about the winter too, and you have to make sure that they are uh, busy during the winter also. But you want to try and make sure that any other triggers or any other things that are in your life kind of are automated or aren't another annoyance to help add to the burnout that you're going to deal with anyways. Is that kind of the right way of thinking there?
Yeah, and I think it is. And I think I just imagine this time of year for you and maybe many of your audience is what you said, is you wake up in the morning, if the first thing you do is hit your email, look at your email, like I imagine that's not the best start to your day, right? Because what it's doing is that first step is it's cueing you to, what are my problems that I'm going to be tackling. And now it's, I love the word that you use, we get into reactive mode when we have this prevention mindset. And so what would be more effective for us is to take, it doesn't have to be a lot of time, at least a little bit of time, and ask ourselves, what's my purpose
Mm.
as a business owner? And if my purpose is to serve customers, help improve their lives, and help improve the community, then when all of these emails come in, it's not like, oh no, not again. It's, what a great opportunity.
Well, I thought that everybody's purpose was to get rich because that's kind of how I got in the game.
How's that working out for you?
Not so well. I would have been better off getting an inheritance. So, y-
Yeah,
any
no kidding.
great rich uncles that need a nephew, just holler at me.
Well, you bring up such a fantastic point, because it becomes, and this is part of mindsets, is what are we focused on,
Yeah.
right? When you look at the successful people in your industry, my guess is that they are not focused on money.
No.
My guess is that they are focused on what brings about, and that is delivering high quality service to customers,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? So if that
Being a
becomes our
people
focus, the money
person.
takes care of
Yeah.
itself.
Exactly. So in the group, in the chat on Facebook, a buddy of mine, Ron Davis, great guy. He has a plumbing company up in Jersey. He asked, "Do you have any exercises to do with your team to work on positive, attack the day kind of mindsets?"
Yeah. So I think let me just give you a quick example, and particularly because we're on this topic of prevention and promotion mindsets. So I've got a book here. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
It's called the 5 Minute Journal. Have you heard of the 5 Minute Journal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a couple of years ago, a CEO friend of mine handed me this book, and he said, "This is going to change your life." And I'm thinking, "Oh, thank you so much. This is great." And I look down at the title, and it's a journal.
Yeah.
In my mind, like outwardly, I'm gracious. In my mind, I'm thinking, there is no way in hell I am journaling. Like
Right.
this is not going to happen. And at the time, I very much had a prevention mindset, and in terms of my career and my life. And I come home and I open it up and I see, oh, it's just answering a few questions. So in the morning, it invites you to ask the question, what are three things that you're grateful for? Three things that would make today great, and then fill in some self-affirmations. And then at the end of the day, it asks you to answer, what are three amazing things that happened today, and how could I have made today even better?
Hmm.
And as I started doing this, I was kind of like, I'll give myself 2 weeks. And if there's positive benefits, great. I'll keep doing it. If not, I'll throw it in the trash. So I started doing it. And by asking myself, what would make today great? And then at the end of the day, following up with what are three amazing things that happened today? My mindset started to change from how do I just survive and avoid problems to how do I make the best of today? And how do I make today better than yesterday? And this week better than last week? And this month better than last month? And so this is an example of just a, a day small 5-minute exercise that when I repeat it over time, it's activating more of my positive mindset neuroconnections in my brain. And so as I strengthen those, I become better at processing my world through those positive mindsets as opposed to the negative mindset.
So
What we've got to do as a leader with our teams, we've got to develop these small little habits or interventions that will activate these positive mindsets. So it could be watching a short video. It could be uh, engaging in some learning. So read an article and let's talk about it. So in fact, as you're saying this, and I think you've got a comment here, is I'm going to look up, I've got some PDFs that I could send over to you with a whole host of resources on
yeah,
that. So let
perfect.
me look that up.
And anybody that's watching the live stream, I added a link to that journal in the chat there. So I'll click on that and get you one. And there's no affiliate link or marketing or anything with that. I wish there was, but I'm too lazy to set it up. But
Yeah. So what I'm sending over to you is we've got a PDF for each of the four sets of mindsets or the four positive mindsets, and then there's a whole host of resources that are designed to help people activate more of those positive mindsets in their life.
sweet, perfect. Okay, so let's go on to number 4 because we're going to spend hours over here giving
Yeah.
what
So
examples.
the last set, and we've kind of, I feel like it's been an undercurrent for our discussion thus far. And the last set is the difference between an inward mindset and an outward mindset. So when we have an inward mindset, we see ourselves as more important than others. When this happens, we have a tendency to see others as objects.
But
But when we have an
isn't I? I mean, aren't I more important than? I'm just
Well, and that no, and it's because this becomes really easy, right? Let me give you an example of this. And perhaps you're a better driver than I am, but has there ever been an instance where you're driving on the freeway and somebody puts their blinker on to merge into your lane and you don't let them in,
like,
right?
let's just ease on the gas pedal a little bit.
Yep. And so I've been there, and this is kind of, in all reality, this is kind of a jerk thing to do. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but in reality, it's kind of a jerk thing to do.
Yeah.
But how do we justify it, right? Because when I justify it, is what I generally say is, oh, I didn't let that car in,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't say I
Yeah.
didn't let that person in. I didn't let that car in. We're objectifying that individual because we're saying my place in this lane is more important to me than it is to you,
Yep.
right? And this is an inward mindset mentality. The outward mindset is you are just as important as I am. Your needs and wants matter just as much as my own. And when I'm able to see that, then I'm able to see you as a person
Mm,
and a person of value. And so, you were talking earlier about how you're joking around and giving some facetious comments to some of the people that you're working with. Well, I think the key is how do you see them to begin with,
right.
right? If they know that you see them and value them as a person, giving some facetious comment isn't going to be a big deal.
Good point.
If they believe that you see them as an object, like,
They're just a
that
tool
could
for me to
ruin
make
their
more
day.
money.
Yeah.
If I treat them like they're just the tool, and I've seen this, and I've interacted with guys, and especially if I dive so deep into the office side of things, and like I'm like, all right, let's look at all this stuff, and I'm a numbers person, so if I start spitting out numbers to the guys, they're like, I'm just a tool for you to make a better number, like to improve your spreadsheet here. And then so it's like, okay, let's reel this back in. Let's develop a better relationship and like let them know that we are very much, in the relationship building industry. But the only way that we continue to do this is if we get to these in numbers here. So yeah, I've been guilty of that for sure, and I've had to reel that back in 100%.
Well, and you're not alone. In fact, I've got a webinar that I'm doing with a group of agricultural CEOs and board of directors. And I had them all take my mindset assessment in advance. And what I've done with those results is I've aggregated those up to the collective level. And so I'm gonna present to them, okay, across you CEOs and board of director members, what is your mindsets across each of these continuums? And on this inward and outward continuum, 73% of them are on the inward mindset side.
Mm,
Right? And so one of my big questions for them is, what message are you sending in your organization about how much you value your people? Like, every indication is that you see your people not as people of value, but as instruments to get you where you want to go.
yeah.
And if that's the culture that you're creating in your organization, you're going to have a hard time having engaged employees. Your turnover rates are going to be high, and you're going to have a hard time moving your organization forward.
Yeah, recruiting is going to be very tough because it's in my opinion, it's easy to recruit if your whole team's on board and they are all like gung ho, and they're selling the company to all of their friends and family, and so it's easier to recruit that way. But if they see themselves as a tool, and then somebody asks, so what do you think about coming on board over there? Like, if you get a meh every time somebody asks, and they're like, okay, I'm not going to change my entire career, put my family's life at risk, livelihood and everything else for a meh. So yeah, I agree with that, and I'm definitely guilty of not showing my team enough support sometimes, especially whenever we're in the middle of this, the heat wave. But one thing that I've been pretty active about and trying to do is, in our industry, the service techs, the service experts, they get burnout really quickly also. And so I've been trying to take on call a lot more than they do, just so that they can have their weekends off with their family and just spend time and try and make sure they're not working until midnight every single night. And it's something that I haven't done the past couple of years. And so it's a little experiment to see how things go over the winter versus last winter, the winter before that, where they were burnt out so much that it took them a month or two to regain the momentum that they were having. So uh, I'm I'm doing it to help them out truly, but I also would like to know if it's going to help, as far as just so they don't get burnt out so much during the summertime. But
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Because there's one thing is, as you're doing that, is you're just sending the message is, I care about you,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that's the critical message to say, because if you're sending the messages, you're just creating dollar signs for me,
Mhm.
then you're not going to get their best. And if you're seeing them as an object, they're probably going to see the customer as an object as opposed to somebody of value themselves. So it trickles down, and And then that's when the bad reviews come in from Yelp or all, any of these other platforms. Is people give bad reviews when they don't feel like they are valued as a person. So if you want your customers to feel valued, you've got to value your people.
I love it. Cool. So what's the link that we need to go to?
Yeah, so the best place to go is my website, ryangottfredson.com, and there's a button right at the top that says free mindset assessment, and go there to take the mindset assessment. There's a variety of other aspects on my website. So I've got a book that actually hit the Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller list recently called Success Mindsets. And one of the things that I do, I've also got a new online course called High Octane Mindsets. If people want to dive in and do some deep introspective work to unlock greater success. Or what I'm doing a lot during this COVID shutdown is I'm doing virtual webinars with teams
Oh, cool.
as a team building process as we dive into the mindsets as a team, and what mindsets do we each have, and what are some of the reasons why we have those mindsets to begin with. And it's a really empowering experience going through this process with teams, because we get to the point where rather than saying, oh, that's a cop out, right? When people aren't stepping up, it allows us to be more empathetic of the fears and insecurities that they may have that's residing beneath the surface that we don't recognize. And when we understand those, rather than say, oh, quit using this as a cop out, we say, how can I support you? Right? It's there's some fear, there's some resistance here. So rather than me react to that, let me approach that in a really healthy way.
I like it. I love it, actually. So before we go, I got one last question. My buddy Scott Oberg, he asked, do you have any suggestions on how to help an employee see that their wants are not more important than the team?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a couple of things.
Mhm.
So one, three things. One is have them take my mindset assessment,
Okay.
right? Because one of the things that the mindset assessment does is it provides objective information on their mindset. So it's comparing that individual's mindsets to the 11,000 plus people that have taken my mindset assessment. So what that does is it just puts a foot in the door for them, right? Because it's starting the process of deepening their self-awareness. The second thing that I think is really important to do is help them to see a bigger purpose than just themselves.
Okay.
So help them to develop a stronger why for why they do what they do, and connect the dots to the impact that they're having in the world around them. And let me give you a couple of book recommendations as well that I think could be helpful. So I do talk about this book in my book, Success Mindsets. So my book, I think will be really beneficial. But one book particularly along these lines is a book called Leadership and Self-Deception. It's written by the Arbinger Institute. And it's a really quick read, but it's also a really powerful read. It's kind of uses a fictional metaphor to paint a picture, and I think it's communicated in a way that's both fun to read, but
Mhm.
also like, oh my goodness, like it hits hard. So that's a book that I might recommend as well.
Cool. That's awesome. And as you were talking about that, I kind of was thinking also, um, it, what would you say as far as if somebody doesn't know what their why is, like how do you kind of like keep prodding in there? Is it like is it like the onion being peeled back and you just keep asking why and why and why, but then at some point some people are just super annoyed with that, being asked why, or they aren't comfortable enough to share with you their true why. You're like, well, how do you get to that?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I think you got to be in a position where hopefully you have a relationship where you can have those types of conversations. I think there's a friend of mine, and she does a lot of work on something that's called job purposing. And the basic idea of job purposing is that if job is just a way to get a paycheck, you're not going to be as engaged in your job as if you see the impact that your work is having on others. And so one of the things that we could do is we could dive into what is your why, what motivates you. But another thing to do is just to remind them, like, you are in people's homes every day and you're having an impact on their lifestyle, right? I don't know, maybe it's just reminding them, like, as a somebody who's been a customer of folks like you, is in fact, I've got a leak in my AC unit, so I lose Freon. So every spring I need to have somebody come out, but I
Mm.
always forget until it hits 100 degrees, and it's like, why isn't my house cooling down? Oh yeah, we got this leak.
Uh,
We need somebody here pronto,
mm.
right? So I'm almost like calling around just to get the first person out here. And when they come, this is a huge deal for me and my family. For the service provider, this is just like
Next.
one of 50. I don't know,
Yeah.
right? But for me, this means everything. And because I've got two small kids, they live upstairs, they sleep upstairs, so it's hotter up there. And if they don't get a good night's sleep, then my
Nobody.
day's a train wreck the next
Yeah,
day, right?
exactly.
So it's like, for me, it's a really big deal. So it's just helping them like see that, because we get it just accustomed to this. And I imagine that in some ways, you, particularly during this time of year, you're feeling used by the customers in a
Oh yeah.
way.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's
but
it's
at the
it's
same
funny
time, we gotta,
you say that. I hate to interrupt you, but there's this meme out there that says, um, "I don't ever hear from my friends unless their AC's broke."
yeah, right.
You feel a little used this time of year, but you get it too. At the same time, you're anywhere that I can be useful to somebody. Definitely, I want to be.
Yeah, and I imagine that one of the things that is maybe as a business owner that you could do is when you ask for testimonials from some of these people, and then relay those directly back to that individual to help them to make those connections between what they're doing and the impact that they're having.
I love that. Cool. I love that so much. So thank you so much for coming on today's show. And it's been a little bit longer than we normally go. We normally go like 20 minutes, but it's so much good stuff here. And I need to check out your book. I didn't even realize you had a book out. I would have got it already. But yeah, I'm going to check that out. And I have a link to your website and to the assessment, and I will share that in the show notes. And again, thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've loved it.
If anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to me. Click the link for his website, for Ryan's website. And if for some reason you just can't remember who we're talking about today, who Ryan or anything like that, just say, it's the guy that talked about the mindset and had so much great information about mindset, and I'll get you connected with Ryan. So again, thank you again for listening to or watching, and the feedback from the guys in the group chat. The Service Business Mastery Podcast, the podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. After 465 episodes, you think that I get that flying out?
You got it. That was good.
Until we talk again next week, I hope you have a wonderful day, and be good and stay cool out there. We'll talk again soon.